Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Hi. My name is Liz Tippett. I'm on the faculty here at the University of Oregon School of Law, and I'm the committee chair of our Consumer Protection Grant Program, which sponsored and organized this symposium today. And we owe a special thanks to Melissa Panter, who put in all of the work to make this possible. So thank you, Melissa. And we're so thrilled to have our guest of honor here today, Attorney General Ellen Rosenblum. I'm not going to delay you too much to get to the guest of honor. I just wanted to give you a quick background of how we are here. And that is that our grant program is actually funded by a lawsuit that was brought by Oregon consumers for an unauthorized debit card fee that they were charged at the pump. And there was leftover money from that lawsuit. And so the court gave the University of Oregon some of that money to sponsor research. And so we have been funding research. We've done 3 years of research grants. We've given out almost $500,000 so far. And yes, yes. But we still have more money to give out, and we will continue to give out the money for over the next several years until it's all gone. So, and many of the researchers that we funded in recent years are here today to present the results of their research and share them with you and the community, as well as the community leaders and the attorneys that we have with us today. I want to note a few people that are here with us today. We've got Associate Dean Reynolds here, Associate Dean Gervin. We also have Dick Slotty, who's our professor up from Lewis and Clark, who taught consumer law there, so we're thrilled to have him. And we also have the folks from Oregon Consumer Justice who partner with us in dispersing this grant money and figuring out who to fund. And we're going to hear from them in just a sec. And so I want to thank you for your partnership. We have Leland Baxter-Neal here and Megan Quintrell, and we're going to hear from them in just a sec. And then the dean will be introducing the Attorney General. All right, go right ahead. Come on up.
Good morning, everybody. It's good to be here. I not only grew up in Eugene, but I graduated from the University of Oregon 20 years ago this year, so this is kind of a fun 20th year reunion, only I don't think any of you were with me 20 years ago.
Go Ducks!
Go Ducks, yeah, absolutely. So, good morning, and thank you, Melissa, for the introduction, or thank you, Liz, for the introduction. My name is Leland Baxter-Neal. I'm the Director of Community Lawyering and Movement Building at Oregon Consumer Justice. I use he, him pronouns, and we, in an effort to be more inclusive, I will provide my visual description. I have blonde hair, glasses, a green sweater, and slacks, and I'm about 5'8". Let me begin by extending Oregon Consumer Justice's appreciation to Liz, Melissa, and the team at University of Oregon for all of their work to put on this symposium. It really is a great lineup of topics, and I'm excited to hear from the panelists throughout the day, and especially from our Attorney General, Ellen Rosenblum, who will speak in a few moments. For those in the audience perhaps not familiar with Oregon Consumer Justice, we are a nonprofit consumer advocacy organization advancing a justice movement where people come first. We believe that everybody can live with dignity, good health, joy, and economic opportunities. And through our efforts, we are pushing to make this vision a reality. OCJ is active across advocacy, community engagement, and the law to protect and expand the rights of Oregon consumers and to end unfair and predatory practices that strip wealth and resources from consumers and families. These predatory practices and systems have disproportionate and compounding impacts on communities of color, where the legacy and present-day reality of structural racism already impose obstacles to wealth building and self-determination. This is why OCJ holds a commitment to center communities of color and other communities disproportionately and frequently harmed by these unfair practices, scams, and schemes. We believe that by advocating and showing up for consumers, we can realize consumer justice and move closer to our vision for a just and equitable Oregon. We are proud to partner with the University of Oregon on the university's Consumer Protection Fund and grant making. Research plays an important role in putting an end to consumer injustice by bringing to light findings that affect everyday people. Research helps consumers, advocates, and the legal community address the present-day needs while pushing for long-term structural change. Thank you all for coming today. Thank you to the researchers, faculty, and advocates who are working to advance consumer protection. I'd like now to introduce my colleague, Megan Quintrell. Megan is a former educator who now leads OCJ's advocacy cohort, a group of community-based organizations who work closely with OCJ in our policy work, and I'll let them take it from here.
Good morning, everyone, and as Leland mentioned, my name is Megan Quintrell. My pronouns are they, them. I have brown hair with a half-shaved head. I'm wearing a black blazer, and I'm about 5'4" on a good day. I am the advocacy cohort lead with Oregon Consumer Justice, and I'm here to share a little about OCJ's policy work, our partnerships, and opportunities for students in the future. For the past year, I've had the absolute honor of co-creating and co-leading OCJ's policy cohort. From the beginning, the focus of the cohort has been to provide an opportunity for partners to co-create with OCJ, a space that is different from many of the policy spaces we're used to operating within. OCJ is committed to centering community in our work and following the lead of community in developing policy solutions. The organizations that presently make up the OCJ policy cohort are Bienestar, Centro Cultural, Coalition of Communities of Color, Latino Community Association, NEA, Oregon Health Equity Alliance, PACUN, Planned Parenthood Advocates of Oregon, the Reimagine Oregon Project, Urban League of Portland, Rogue Action Center, SUMA, and Unite Oregon. Each of these organizations bring different levels of experience to navigating the legislative process and statewide policy advocacy, but all of them have deep roots in their communities and direct experiences with the injustices OCJ is working to address and resolve. Alongside many of these allies, OCJ advocated during the past legislative session for policies to protect our homes from toxic chemicals, expand broadband access, enact safeguards for our personal data, and to take action to address the state's housing crisis. OCJ also championed legislation that aimed to provide key protections for families dealing with debt collectors and make Oregon's insurance laws more consumer-friendly, creating stronger mechanisms to hold bad actors accountable. It was an incredibly challenging session. A historic 6-week walkout derailed momentum on many critical policies. And when it ended, legislators rushed to enact what they could in the few remaining days of the session, unfortunately leaving some of OCJ's key priorities on the cutting room floor. That said, we are already diligently at work planning for the future. We are working closely with our community partners to explore how to better center the communities that are most impacted by consumer injustice to push for creation and implementation for community-centered policy. For the students and professors in this room, I'll end by noting that OCJ is in its second season of our internship program and also hosting our first 4-credit externship. OCJ is incredibly grateful for the support of our wonderful interns and the significant contributions in moving OCJ's work forward. We welcome students from all relevant disciplines, not exclusively law students, to consider joining us in this work. I wish you all an insightful and informative afternoon. I'm going to present Dean Burke to come.
Good morning, everyone. That's where you say good morning back. There we go. I want to say thank you to Leland and Megan for adding that description of themselves to be even more inclusive. My pronouns are she and her, and I am a Black woman wearing reading glasses. Yes, I've come to that point in my life. And with ombre hair, wearing a plaid suit, pantsuit with a gold top. And it is indeed my distinct pleasure and honor to welcome all of you to Oregon Law. I'm Marcilyn Burke. I'm the Dean and the Dave Frohmeyer Chair in Leadership in Law. And before I get to my assigned task, which is introducing our dear friend, our Attorney General, Ellen Rosenblum, I want to say a word about Professor Liz Tippett, who I know she's like, oh my goodness, who very modestly described how this all came to be. And I just want to say that she was, in fact, the moving force in getting these funds directed to the University of Oregon, right? So many, many years ago as this litigation ensued. And while there were others who were involved, she was certainly leading the charge for us and understanding how important it is in our fight for consumer justice, which is a cause near and dear to all of us, that there needed to also be some research done, right, behind this, and to get these important ideas out into the public. And so I want to thank her and want all of you to join me in thanking her for helping this all come to be. And so now I'm going to make someone else uncomfortable. She recognized 2 of our associate deans, and we have a number of staff here that are important to the effort. So I'm going to also recognize Associate Dean Ray Sykes, because if it has to do with money, then Ray and his team are integral to the process. So I want to also thank him in working with our grants office and making sure all of these things flow through that $500,000 that we've been able to give away. So now it is my pleasure. As I said, this is a topic that's near and dear to our hearts, and we know that everyone deserves to be treated fairly in their consumer transactions, whether we're talking about the biggest purchases of our lives, like investing in education, or a home, or a car, or whether it's those smaller purchases that indeed led to this lawsuit at the grocery store, at the gas pump, or online. And we know that the law plays a critical role in making sure that people are treated fairly and honestly, and holding businesses accountable when they're not doing what they should be doing. So I'm really delighted to see the students here today in the audience, and I know a number of you are online, and so we welcome you as well. And I hope that many of you are now thinking about, if you weren't already, thinking about a career in pursuing careers in consumer protection law, because you are needed. As you know, as we all know, all of us that have an email account know that every single day someone is trying to scam us, right? Almost every day we will receive something. And so I want to extend a warm welcome to everyone, not just our students, but the scholars, the lawyers, the community leaders that are joining us here to share their insights and their research. And to those, as I said, who are here in person, but also on Zoom. So Jess Yates would want me to remind everyone to speak into the microphone because we do have people online, and to make sure that they can hear you. So it is my great honor to introduce our special guest today, Attorney General Ellen Rosenblum. And she is no stranger to any of us here at the law school. She's a proud graduate of this great law school. And after law school, she served in many capacities, but as a prosecutor at the U.S. Attorney's Office, later as a judge for Multnomah County, and then on the Oregon Court of Appeals. And she was first elected as Attorney General in 2012, and she is our first woman to serve in that capacity. So and she is now serving in her 3rd term in that position, and her priorities include consumer protection and civil rights. She's advocating for and protecting Oregon's children, seniors, immigrants, crime victims, and those saddled with education-related debt. She's also committed to helping the district attorneys and local law enforcement in prosecuting in areas such as elder abuse and complex crimes that have made, and the many complex crimes that have made crimes against children a priority, as well as I was saying, consumer internet privacy issues are also a high priority for our Attorney General. She's also a leader among Attorney Generals. She is the president-elect of the National Association of Attorneys Generals, and she's a past chair of the Conference of Western Attorneys General. I also just want to say a public word of thanks to her for the incredible opportunities that she makes available to our students to really get in there and protect and fight for the rights of Oregonians. And so our students are able to work in her offices and get incredible experiences in addition to the ice cream that she treats us to down the street. And she knows she's overdue for taking me for ice cream. So I just said that out here in public just to get that on the record. So again, we are delighted and honored to have her with us today, and she has graciously agreed to take questions after she makes her remarks. So please have those ready for her, and join me in a round of applause for our Attorney General, Ellen Rosenblum.
Wow, thank you, Dean. I wish I could just stand here and sing the praises of the dean all morning long and the amazing talent that she has put together over these, I'm not sure how many years now, but I used to think of her as new. She's not the new dean anymore, but she's just got such a great student body and such wonderful faculty and staff here. I couldn't be more proud of being a graduate of the University of Oregon Law School. It just really warms my heart. So I think I better put my water down here. So I am Ellen Rosenblum, Oregon Attorney General. My pronouns are she, her. So my daughter and I argue about this, but I believe I am 5'5". She says, no, Mom, you're really 5'4". I have, at the present time, dark brown hair, and I'm wearing purple today. And again, just really excited to be here. And let me just also say thank you to Leland and Megan and to OCJ. I could also spend a lot of time singing the praises of this amazing organization. So I go back to when it was not yet in existence. And I want to talk a little bit, I'll put that in a little bit of perspective as I get into my remarks. But it's so amazing and wonderful to have your organization, it's ours, as a part of protecting the most vulnerable in our communities and really, really looking out for those who truly need our help and appreciate it. So, again, a pleasure to join you all for this important gathering. And whether you're a first-year law student, as I think maybe some of you are, or a PhD looking to do some interesting research, you are welcome here, and I hope that you'll talk up what we discuss here. I'm here to encourage you to basically do three things. One is to understand consumer protection a little better. Two is to, along the way, get you interested in pursuing this area of commerce and law. And specifically to help you to get to feeling comfortable, perhaps, applying for some of the generous grant monies afforded by Oregon Consumer Justice. So think about that, and you might be sitting there going, well, how can I do that? I'm just a lowly law student. Well, I'm gonna give you some ideas there as well. Somewhere here I have I think you all got one of these. Okay, so for starters, let me say that what we at the Oregon Department of Justice think of when we use the term consumer protection, we think of it as a form of safety, financial safety, for people who buy things. And that's all of us. Safety from unfair and unlawful practices in the marketplace. And by consumer protection, we also mean ensuring a level playing field for those businesses that follow the rules. And you should note that our office also handles financial fraud, antitrust, securities fraud, and other financial protection cases that may not directly involve consumers, but indirectly harm them, or may harm them. So consumer protection is a broad field and ranges all over the place, from basic truth in advertising to student debt, to data privacy, to companies that lie about their impact on our environment. Now, some of you are probably interested in environmental law. That's what I've heard. Well, don't leave the room, because you're going to see that environmental law and consumer protection are closely allied. So think about that in terms of potential research projects. We talked about it already a bit, but the lawsuit that led to the creation of Oregon Consumer Justice is a classic example of consumer protection at work, both at the front end and the back end. And what do I mean by that? Without a policy change in the laws, without that policy change, while the lawsuit was successful, the underlying BP ARCO lawsuit, it would not have had nearly the impact that it had without a law change. And of course, without strong unlawful trade practices laws, it could not have been brought in the first place, that lawsuit. It all started back in 2013 when a lawsuit filed by Portland attorney David Sugarman against ARCO, the owner and operator of many gasoline stations here in Oregon and elsewhere, and its parent BP. So you'll hear BP, ARCO, they're basically the same thing. So David filed his lawsuit on behalf of drivers who used debit cards to purchase gas in Oregon from an ARCO AM/PM type gas station between 2011 and 2013. And these customers were charged a debit card fee of 35 cents per transaction. But ARCO and BP had failed to disclose these fees properly, as a jury subsequently found. This failure was a clear violation of Oregon's unlawful trade practices law and led to a jury verdict of $409 million against ARCO and its parent company. At the conclusion of the trial and the jury's verdict, the judge in the case determined that each class member was entitled to collect $200, less attorney fees. So after subsequent appeals and a negotiated settlement, the final sum worked out to a $185 award per debit card holder divided into 2 payments. And legal services contractor Epic tracked down all the eligible drivers they could throughout the country based largely on the debit card numbers that ARCO turned over. And most of the check recipients were from Oregon and surrounding states. So after this settlement money was distributed, $162 million remained unclaimed. And under the old Oregon law, all unclaimed funds like these would have reverted back to, I'm going to call it the bad guy, the payer, in this case, ARCO. And that just doesn't feel right, does it? Why should they get that windfall? Well, fortunately, prompted partly by this very case, a change in Oregon law made by the state legislature in 2015 ensured that unclaimed settlement funds would not be returned to the bad actor. Okay, and that is, does anyone know what that law is called? Come on, you're law students. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. It's either CPRE or CYPRE. Does any? CYPRE. CYPRE? Okay. And what does it mean? What does CYPRE mean? Does anybody know? Okay, I'll tell you. It means as near as possible. So you, French or Latin, something like that. Anyways, it basically what it comes down to is it's a really important law. You guys need to study it. Maybe research it, okay? Because maybe it can be used in other ways. But what it made possible, and by the way, it would not have come about, this change in the law would not have come about if consumer advocates, including my office, but not only Oregon DOJ, had not lobbied hard for it. Because you can imagine who was lobbying against it and who has lots of money to spend on lobbyists. BP, ARCO, right? So they, of course, wanted to keep their ill-gotten gains, and we wanted to make sure they didn't. And guess who won? So thankfully, that then led to the formation of Oregon Consumer Justice. But even that wasn't a foregone thing. We had to go to the courts. We had to have judges who understood consumer protection, understood how important it was to have a place for these monies, not just from the BP case, but from future cases. Because now that CYPRE law is in existence, it doesn't just, well, hopefully we're going to be able to continue to provide funds to the University of Oregon and to other entities, you know, forever, because this new law makes that possible. So not only at the policy level, but also at the legal, directly legal litigation level, we have beautiful example of consumer protection writ large. So the unclaimed ARCO money was split between a legal aid fund and a new watchdog nonprofit, which we're learning about today. And in turn, as you know, OCJ has now given the University of Oregon $3 million from its funds to pay for this research and address issues affecting consumers in Oregon. So I realize this is a long-winded explanation, but it shows just how effective consumer protection work can be. So let me now tell you a little story about me. Back when I was a law student at the University of Oregon, and okay guys, I'm owning it. It was 50 years ago, okay? Don't start trying to figure all that out. I'm telling you, it's true. And if you need documentation, if you need evidence, which of course if you're taking trial practice, you know you have to have exhibits. Here's the exhibit, Exhibit A. You guys got a copy of this, okay? It looks sort of yellow because it was a long time ago. And Osberg was kind enough to make me a framed copy of this recently, so it's on my wall in my office. But what's the date on it? October 18th, 1973. I was second year. I was a second year law student at the time at the University of Oregon. Not in this building. This building had not been built yet, unfortunately. We were still over at the brutalistic style of architecture building at 13th and Kincaid, which is used for something else now. Thank goodness, you guys are so lucky. But look, I got a great education. It didn't matter. There were only, by the way, 2 stalls in the women's bathroom because women were not really a factor yet in law school, or certainly in the legal profession. That's for another day. Happy to come and talk about that. I was one of the founders of Lane County Women Lawyers. And I recently found my file of that first year of that committee, and it's a lot of fun. It's really a lot of fun. And again, another topic for another day. So I needed a summer job. Like, who else? Who doesn't need a summer job, right, after your first year of law school? And I was lucky enough to be selected for one of 12 Osberg internships. Oregon Student Public Interest Research Group still exists. And each one paid, there were 12, each one paid $1,000. For the summer. And oh my God, that seemed like an absolute fortune to me. I was so excited to get one of those. And each one of us got to choose between consumer or environmental research that summer with our $1,000. So I picked consumer, in part because of the brand new Unlawful Trade Practices Act that was coming online. And I thought it was just really exciting to be a part of that, to kind of figure out what kinds of cases could we actually bring under that new law. And so I was kind of off and running. And our benefactor was none other than Ralph Nader. Ralph Nader personally came out to cheer us on. And that was like just also an incredible moment. My 3 topics that I picked for that summer internship for my research were prescription drug pricing and generic substitution laws, rental housing referral agencies, which was a particular big deal with students, and long-term, like lifetime health spa, we used to call them health spa contracts. All 3 of those topics resulted in reports over the course of that next year, and one of them even got into the newspapers in this Exhibit A here with a Register Guard editorial. And my favorite part of this editorial, you don't have to read it, but I'll read you part of it. Osberg's facts were not easily come by. The group got little cooperation from the pharmacies, so it went to the State Public Welfare Division, which had conducted a price survey early this year. Welfare sought to keep the list secret for reasons known only to welfare. So, I love that. So the student group went to the Attorney General, who ruled that the new, and it was brand new, Public Records Disclosure Act required welfare to cough up. So they had to cough up the prices that were very secret that the pharmacies were paying for, that welfare was paying to the pharmacies for the different drugs. And generic substitution laws didn't really exist yet. So for the most part, they had to buy brand names rather than generic. So that was part of the legislation that I was able to then go and lobby on behalf of for Osberg the following year as a second-year law student. This is why I decided to stay in Oregon. I wasn't going anywhere after this because it was amazing to me that it was possible for a second-year law student to go to the legislature and be listened to and actually contribute to the passage of really some major, I mean, we just take for granted that we have generic substitution, that it's allowed, but it wasn't back in 1973. And I'm just going to add that my rental housing referral project was also a lot of fun because somebody told me, I wanted to do an undercover investigation, right? I thought that would be really cool. And I needed some money because I needed to, in addition to my stipend, I wanted some funds to be able to purchase memberships in these rental housing referral agency businesses. And so somebody said, well, you can go to, why don't you try the Consumer Protection Division of DOJ, the Oregon Attorney General's office. And I'm like, oh, who are they? What do they do? So I found out that the office was in Portland. It was run by a man named Mick Gillette. Who's heard of Mick Gillette? Okay, former, now retired senior justice of the Oregon Supreme Court. But at the time, he was head of the Consumer Protection Division of Oregon DOJ. I went to meet him in his little messy office, and he gave me $200 from the AG fund. So here we have OCJ. Back then we had $200 from DOJ to be able to buy these memberships in these really phony businesses, and we were able to demonstrate that they were providing essentially no service but taking students' money in doing so. So a lot of fun that I got to have in law school, and truthfully, I'll admit it, I didn't do law review. I didn't do some of the things that my professor, Dave Frohnmeyer, told me to do because I got so excited about consumer protection that that's all I wanted to do. And it's kind of continued to be kind of woven in and out of my career, not always the focus, but certainly came back to it big time in the last 12 years, and it's been amazing. So my authority as your Attorney General comes from more than 300 statutes. And in the realm of consumer protection, as I've suggested, my most important mandate comes from the UTPA, the Unlawful Trade Practices Act, which was brand new back in the early 70s. And it's the same law that David Sugarman used to sue ARCO and BP. And simply put, it gives me and my department broad authority to protect consumers. And we do so actively and we do so aggressively, as I'll try to outline for you in just a moment. And somebody keep track of my time, okay? Because I lose track completely. So give me an idea when you think I'm getting close, and I'll try to wrap up. Okay, so some of the things we do, and we gave you a few samples in your little books, in your little booklets there. We have these, and by the way, I just want to introduce Ellen Clem, who's our Consumer Education Outreach Director. We call each other the other Ellen. We confuse everybody. It's lots of fun. And thank you, Ellen, for putting together basically all of our consumer materials that you can find online at OregonConsumer.gov. So some of them, just a few examples, are in your materials there. Unfortunately, I didn't see any of our fans, but you can get fans, Fight Fraud fans. They're really handy in the summer especially. But we also have all of our materials in Spanish, and other languages can be obtained and downloaded off of our website. So feel free to do that. And by the way, share them with your relatives. Share them with your mom, dad, grandma, grandpa. They're often the ones that are most vulnerable to scams and frauds and that sort of thing. So, you know, some of the situations that we do, well, first of all, we receive over 30,000 complaints, consumer complaints every year at our office, and thanks to this amazing group of trained volunteers, many of them are like former educators, everything, you know, come from all different backgrounds. Every single one of our complaints gets reviewed, and where appropriate gets passed along for further action. It could be sent over to, it could be resolved, and we've gotten about $2 million back this past year just from individual complaints that we received to help, and we help people. We're not their lawyer, but we can contact the business, we can send a letter, and you'd be surprised at the kinds of responses we get fairly quickly when they might have not even gotten their phone call answered. So really, you're proud of that work that we do. Some of the situations we get resolved might seem really small, you know, like the older couple who contacted us after a Kirby vacuum salesperson had aggressively solicited them, you know, pressured them into signing a contract, demanded cash payments, was really nasty to them. They tried to get their money back, but, you know, they were not successful. And then after our office got involved, the company refunded the couple's money and canceled their contract. And as you can imagine, they were really thrilled. And to them, this was like a really, really big deal. So we want to continue to do this work. We may be settling cases for hundreds of millions of dollars, and we are, but it really matters to us when we're able to handle one of these smaller but really important matters. And a lot of our work goes into preventing fraud in the first place. So we put on scam jams. Ellen is all over the state. I tell her she shouldn't ever be at the office really or rarely because she should be out there on the road. And she's, you should just see her in action. She's incredible. These scam jams, we do them with AARP. We do them with DCBS, which is the Department of Consumer and Business Services. I'm going to assume you know what AARP is, right? Anyway, you'll get an invitation to join when you're, I don't know, like around 40. They have quite the membership. So as you know, these scams, they're everywhere. And so, you know, we sometimes feel like we're playing whack-a-mole with the fraudsters. We work hard to try to identify scams before they cause major damage and heartbreak and hardship. And so we try to get the word out through our Scam Alert Network, which you can also sign up for, and your friends and relatives can as well. We have, again, all these resources available. So take them with you and study up. So back to the legal work that our office performs in this area. We actually have a pretty small group in our consumer protection division or section. It's actually a section of a division. We have about 15 lawyers, about maybe a similar number of investigators, but again, all those trained volunteers. And we also work every day on bipartisan. Some people think we're just a bunch of, you know, partisan hacks, the attorneys general. Well, in fact, we work every day, our staff, on a very apolitical, bipartisan basis on multi-state consumer protection cases. And those are the ones you often hear about. Those are the ones that are really, you know, amazing in terms of our ability to leverage all of our resources and to, frankly, kind of scare away these big companies. They really don't want to go to court and fight us. And so we are able to settle a lot of big cases. In fact, we're currently in trial in Washington, D.C., in federal court in Washington, D.C. against Google. You ever heard of them? And we're alleging that Google illegally maintained its monopoly over search and search advertising. And we're currently finishing up with the state's witnesses in that case. We have a lawyer from Oregon Department of Justice, Cheryl Heemstra, who's there actually handling some of the witnesses and working closely with our colleagues around the country. Colorado was one of the lead states, other states involved in that too. So kind of gives you an idea that, you know, at any given moment, there's a whole lot going on. You might have also heard about, brought some notes about another case that's kind of an interesting one that's going on. We recently filed a stockholder derivative suit against the board of directors of Fox Corporation for breach of fiduciary duty. And we allege in this case that the board of Fox took a massive risk in pursuing profits by perpetuating and peddling known falsehoods, and that their choices exposed themselves and their company to liability and exposed their shareholders to significant risks. Now, why is this important to Oregon? Why would Oregon be the state that would bring this lawsuit against Fox and getting all this national attention? Because its investors include the Oregon public employees, right? PERS invests in Fox Corporation. Now, I didn't make that decision. Somebody else did. But we have over $5 million invested in Fox. And for that reason, we are bringing this lawsuit. And we're really excited about it. We've alleged that they basically pushed narratives that appealed to their audience, their Fox audience, regardless of the facts, and created exposure to the defamation that resulted in them having to settle for quite a lot of money against, or in favor, excuse me, of Dominion. You remember the whole issue with the Dominion voting materials. So, machines, excuse me. Okay, so I just wanted to give you a couple of examples of the type of work that we do that you might not think of as consumer protection, but as I said, antitrust, so that's the Google case, investments, securities fraud, certainly the Box case and many other cases. We are solicited, frankly, we are pitched frequently to bring investor securities fraud cases. They can be very lucrative for lawyers. Think about that for your future. And they are really, really important because they involve your constituents' money. They involve Oregonians and taxpayers' money in these funds. Okay, so I could go on all day talking about our cases, but I'm not going to do that other than to say we've had some big environmental cases that really are consumer protection cases. One of them against Volkswagen. You might remember the big settlement in the Volkswagen case involving the issue of emissions fraud. Okay, we received Oregon alone received $85 million. And the heart of that case was that VW had advertised its cars as legitimate green vehicles, when in fact they were some of the dirtiest cars on the road. So is that about consumer protection? Absolutely, but it also involves the environment. I wanted to also mention a couple of other cases. I have lots of details on these, but I'm gonna skip over and mention our most recent, I think, incredible result. The largest environmental settlement in the history of the state of Oregon occurred right here in this state through our office in the past 6 months against Monsanto. And if any of you are familiar with PCBs, polychlorinated biphenyls, they have polluted Oregon for the past 90 plus years. Thanks, but no thanks to Monsanto company, thankfully the only company that made them. So that makes it a little easier, right, to sue when you know that's only been made by one company. You don't have to sue a million different companies or people and figure out who's really at fault. We know who's at fault here. Anyway, at the end of the day, after the jury had been selected, okay, and that's really interesting because if you're not ready to go to trial in these cases, then you're not going to get the big settlements. My colleagues around the country weren't ready to go to trial. They settled for peanuts. We settled for $698 million to reverse these harmful effects, to try to reverse some of these harmful effects of PCBs on Oregon's environment. And on top of that, the money came in a lump sum, which is very unusual. In these settlements, you'll often hear these big numbers, and then you'll hear that it's actually not going to get paid for like 20 years, or it's going to be dribbling in over 20 years. Not necessarily a bad thing, but in this case, the money's in the bank. And this is just a huge win for our state. So again, I could go into a lot of detail. If you want more detail, happy to share. But the sad thing is that the toxic legacy of Monsanto lives on in our lands and our rivers and other waterways and poses ongoing health risks. So that's why this settlement is just so incredibly important. And we're going to be, the legislature, the governor, my office, state agencies are going to be putting these funds to use very soon for statewide remediation and cleanup. They are earmarked for that purpose. They can't just go into the general fund and be used for any purposes. They have to be used, just like our opioid settlement funds. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that today. But we've in the last year, we've brought in, between the Monsanto case and the opioid settlements, $1.5 billion to the state of Oregon. The opioid settlements will be more of the kind of dribbling in over the years, which isn't, again, not necessarily a bad thing, but as to the environment, we've got to get on this immediately, and we are going to start putting these funds to use. Okay, one more case that's environmental and consumer that I want to mention, and that is also ongoing. We recently sued DuPont and 3M for their involvement in the manufacture of something called, well, all right, I'm just going to say it's the PFAS case, okay? Y'all, anybody heard of PFAS? Okay, well, PFAS contamination in Oregon is unfortunately maybe even as bad as the PCBs. We just didn't realize it until recently. We're just starting to figure out how bad that is. So it's the common term for something I can't pronounce, but you can look it up. But often these chemicals are used in firefighting foam, and often on military bases and at airports, and we've actually learned that in Oregon, there's some airports in particular that have been contaminated, and guess what? People live near airports, right? And often it's people who are most in need of our assistance. And that's why we call it environmental justice and not just environmental protection. And we call it consumer justice because we need to be looking out for those people that live near the places where the pollution occurs, because they are most at risk, and we know that. So that is another example of a case that we are handling that is a consumer protection case and is an environmental protection case. So again, I know that U of O law, other law schools as well, really focus a lot on the environment, and they don't really steam too much on consumer protection. Why not? They are so integrally related, and that is one thing that I think OCJ is doing such a great job of elevating, bringing those issues together, because we are looking out for our most vulnerable wherever we find them. Okay, so what, again, I'm gonna close with probably the most valuable, I think, part of my speech, okay? But I have to find it because it's actually close to the end here. And there's so much more I wanted to share. But here's what it is. I wanted to give you some ideas for what research is needed, okay? And so start taking notes now if you haven't up until now, okay? Because I'm skipping over a whole lot to get to this point because I knew this was going to go longer than I thought. Give me one more second here. Wow, Ellen, this is a long speech. I can't believe I have to skip over all this stuff, but I just don't want to take up too much more time. So here are a few, if I may be so bold. I want each of you to use some of your substantial brain power to imagine this. What would you research if someone gave you $10,000 to conduct a study? Right? Isn't that really why we're here today? At least be thinking about that. I'm going to make a few suggestions. So, number one, you could research new ways to address the problem of small harms. We talked about small harms today, something that's central to consumer protection. That is, most individual consumer harms are relatively small, like a few $100s or less. And those small harms, when added together, result in huge windfalls to bad actors, like the BP case, right? Incentivizing companies to break the law. Hiring a lawyer to help with a small claim does not make financial sense, either for the lawyer or for the client. Although, in this case, it made some sense, didn't it, to Mr. Sugarman? But think about how long that took. Think about what was involved in bringing that case. So even going to small claims court requires some knowledge of which laws apply and a willingness to learn that process. Take time off of work. And if you prevail, you have to figure out how to collect the judgment. That might not be an easy thing to do. So as a result, most consumers don't bother, resulting in under-enforcement of the laws and a feeling by consumers that the laws don't work for them. Public enforcers like attorneys general and private enforcers like trial lawyers can aggregate those small claims together, and they can address some of the bad conduct on a wider scale. But many harms still go unaddressed, and individual consumers are often still helpless to resolve their individual wrongs. So how can we address this problem? Interesting research project for you. Or you could research more effective ways to deliver legal information and advice to consumers. Now, as I've said, I think we do a great job. There's now a vast body of state and federal consumer laws and regulations, and most are very complex, filled with jargon, and difficult to interpret and apply. Consumers have rights, but they don't know what they are, and they don't know how to use the laws to their benefit. Although public agencies and consumer groups regularly do outreach like we do, most consumers still have no idea what rights they have and what to look out for when buying a car, when applying for a loan, or responding to a debt collection notice. There have to be ways to leverage AI, kind of a scary area that we haven't talked about yet, but really important, can be useful, mobile apps, and other technologies to help consumers access critical information about effectively navigating the marketplace. That, I think, is an area of research that you might want to consider. You could also research better policies and enforcement tools to address one of the great downsides of technology. It has made it vastly easier and cheaper for scammers to operate with impunity. So with the rise of VoIP, it became easy to place millions of scam calls from overseas at a low cost and beyond the reach of enforcers. And with the rise of AI, voice cloning and video generating tools are going to make it easier for scammers to fool even cautious consumers, even the ones we're teaching. And they're listening. And they're even sharing our materials. We regularly see overseas scammers setting up spoofed websites that look like real local businesses. And almost overnight, millions of dollars are gone with no hope of recovery. So what can we do differently in the United States to better protect consumers? And are there changes to the laws that we should be enacting, especially with the rise of AI? You could research whether consumers respond differently in an online world than in a paper world. Are they more or less likely to read the fine print? Are we less likely to see notices and disclosures that the law assumes we read? Are there age differences or cultural differences in how we understand and process digital information or interact with digital services that should inform consumer protection laws? You could research how to measure and demonstrate harm, especially economic harms from privacy violations. How do you figure out what the harm is when your privacy is violated? You could research the negative impacts on consumer protection and consumer perception from the failure of Congress to restore the FTC's Section 13B authority that allowed them to recover billions of dollars annually in restitution for consumers. They can't do that anymore. What's up with that? And from the failure of Congress to address the problem of forced arbitration clauses. I think maybe you did have somebody doing some research in that area, but that's continuing, and there's lots more that we need to do there. You could research the impact of congressional dysfunction on increasing state-level consumer protection regulation and the burden on state enforcement. You could research the effectiveness of consumer protection statutes that do not include a private right of action. So on top of these suggestions for research, privacy, artificial intelligence, and medical debt today are trending topics. And I think any one of those would be fair game for at least an application. So there is plenty to work on. I hope some of you will take up OJC's challenge to the University of Oregon and propose meaningful research projects in the area of consumer protection. And I don't think it matters that if you're only a first-year law student, because after all, that's what I was, right? And I only got $1,000. You can get more. So I hope I've made the case for how important this work is, and I've shown how a small little research project can lead to a change in the law, which in turn can improve the lives of hundreds and even thousands of your fellow Oregonians. So with that, I will take your questions. And as I said, I probably skipped over half of my planned remarks, but I wanted to make sure that I had time for you all. And I'm not saying I can answer your questions, but you definitely can ask them. Thank you. So who's in charge here?
Anyone have questions, I can deliver a microphone. So shy.
I've got one. There we go. A plant.
You mentioned how lucrative this can be for attorneys to be in this business, but I know you have to make decisions all the time, where to exercise your discretion and your authority. How do you decide whether or not to bring a case? Because there's so many possibilities out there. So how do you decide?
Right. Whoa. Well, certainly on the small claims area, I don't decide. That is all left up to my wonderful staff. And as I said, they research and respond to every single complaint. So in that sense, we try to pretty much do what the people need. But we also look to see how many complaints we get in different areas, right? And so each year we even publish our top 10 list of the complaints that Oregonians have brought against the different, whether it's telecommunications, whether it's healthcare related, whether it's towing, tow trucks and robocalling are probably the top two that everybody agrees are awful, right? Even the Republicans and Democrats get along on those two. So no, seriously, we have some great bipartisan cases in those two areas, especially, and you'll be seeing more. But as far as the big cases go, which I think is what you, Dean, was referring to, you know, it's a great question because we can't do everything. So there's the multi-state side and there's the on our own side. The on our own side is when I actually have to take the big gulp and say, okay, you know, we're going to actually bring this lawsuit. We're going to bring this Monsanto lawsuit. We're going to bring this Fox News lawsuit. We're going to, you know, be in the lead on, sometimes it's the lead versus a participant. There's a big difference in terms of our role. When we're in the lead, we really have to devote the resources. And as you can imagine, Oregon Department of Justice is not the size of California or New York or even Washington. So we really do have to, you know, kind of figure out what we're going to get the most, I don't want to say bang for the buck exactly, because it's not all about money. It's often about, in fact, it's really more about injunctive terms, about improving the situation for the businesses that are you know, wanting to have the level playing field versus those who have violated the rules. So look, you got to run for Attorney General. You got to be in charge, and you got to have, you know, have a lot of discretion. You have your staff to guide you. You hope to pick, you know, people that can do this work. You want to make sure that it's something that they're going to get excited about. And we often, I won't say often, but we do hire out to get help from the private bar on some of these cases. We did that with Monsanto because, frankly, we didn't have the bandwidth to do it ourselves. We have wonderful lawyers who supervise. We always have to supervise our outside counsel, which we call SAGs, Special Assistant Attorneys General. So we sit down and we frankly have to decide, you know, what we have the bandwidth for, what we have the passion for, and what we have the evidence for. And, you know, I've been asked, and there may be somebody in this room who's saying, like, why haven't you brought that lawsuit against ExxonMobil? Why haven't you brought the big climate change lawsuit yet? Well, we're still looking at that. But truthfully, we had Monsanto ongoing, we had PFAS going, we have various other big cases going. We can't take on too much or we'll fail, and we don't want that to happen, of course. And we'll burn out our lawyers and our staff, and we won't even, we really pride ourselves on working closely, as I said, with the private bar, but when it comes right down to it, it's on me. The buck stops here, and I want to be able to demonstrate the results, and I think we've been able to do that successfully. But, you know, I do have a lot of discretion, and sometimes I will say this. We recently, this isn't exactly consumer protection, but in the area of reproductive rights, you might have heard about the lawsuit that we are leading with the state of Washington to maintain the ability to keep the drug mifepristone on the market and available for abortion medication. So, you know, that has been a huge case where we had to take that big gulp and decide that we were going to be in the lead on that. And I am so glad we did. We now have 17 states that are protected. I'm not saying that if the US Supreme Court does something that we will necessarily be saved, but up until this point, because we brought that lawsuit, we were able to ensure that, at least as to the 17 states that joined us, that we have the protection of knowing, we know that this very important gold standard medication will be available, and there will be accessible to Oregonians into the hopefully permanent future. So that's an example of where, you know, we had to take the big dive and just decide this is important. We have to do this. Oregon is known for this. We are known as the state that has the best protections, the least restrictions, and we're going to continue that. And we are also a state that deeply cares about our environment. I was around for, you know, Governor Tom McCall, and it was during those years that, you know, many of the laws that we just take for granted in the state, you know, Senate Bill 100, our land use laws, our bottle bill laws, our, you know, a lot of laws related to the coast, making our beaches public. So many things that we all just take for granted, but this is a state that deeply, deeply cares and has this history of caring about our environment. So we have to do that. And then when it comes down to consumers, everybody in this room is a consumer, right? But we are not the most vulnerable. We are, frankly, the ones that have to look out for those who are. And so that's our job.
Wonderful. Any more questions? Oh, we got a question. Judge Sugar's here. Welcome, Judge Sugar.
Yes, hello, Judge Sugar. Woohoo! And can I also just say, I want to just thank Professor Slotty. He really is the Dean of Consumer Protection in Oregon. For 40 years, he ran the program at Lewis and Clark Law School for the students, and now look what he's continuing to do. So thank you, Dick. He's just one of those names
there we go. I just wanted to ask what your biggest regret or something you wish you did differently, either in law school or as an attorney, would be.
Ooh, regret. Well, hey, I could get deeply personal here, or I could just give you a fluff answer. Which do you want? Oh my gosh. So I just feel really lucky, okay, to have had to have my license to practice law. I mean, I never imagined all the opportunities that I would have as, being a lawyer. And I didn't honestly have a plan. There are people I know who knew they wanted to be a judge when they were 5 years old. I'm not one of those people. Things have kind of popped out of the sky a little bit for me, like even being Attorney General. I was not planning on this. I didn't leave the bench to become Attorney General. I left the bench and then 5 months later discovered that I might have an opportunity to be Attorney General. So I would say that for the most part, I feel like I've really been fortunate. I think being one of the women early on in my career was an advantage. I mean, yes, there were some, I could go on about all the ways in which there were insults and injuries to women, especially at the beginning of when we were entering the profession, but they haven't gone away, actually. So I guess, in terms of regrets, look, I went to law school 50 years ago, right? And so that, it's not hard to do the math. I kind of wish that maybe I had compressed my career a little bit more as a judge so that I would have had more years where I could have moved on in some other spaces that I've discovered I really love. So that's a kind of a personal answer because I've now announced that I'm not running for a 4th term, right, as Attorney General. So I'm looking forward to the future, looking forward to perhaps another chapter of my career. I don't know what that's going to be, but I'm like, why did I stay on the bench for 22 years when I could have been doing, blah, 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 blah. Well, I loved it, that's why. But looking back, I remember Sid Lezak, who knows that name? I'm sure Dick does. Sid Lezak was my boss. He was the U.S. attorney. And when I became a judge, he said to me, Ellen, do this for 4 years and then move on. I'm like, why would I just do it for 4 years? But I now kind of look back and I understand that your career, your law career is, there's a sort of I guess a beginning and an end. I don't quite view it that way. But no, I just feel really, really lucky, blessed for having had these opportunities. And I don't really have any regrets.